This is a great privilege for me to be here on stage with two eminent, versatile personalities, and both of them from very high-ranking top private universities of India. I would like to start off the discussion by inviting Anirudh and Zeena to talk about their universities. What makes these universities different? How are they functioning? Briefly, so that we can get to know what are the innovations and great initiatives that are happening in your universities.
Thanks, Kalyani. Hello, everyone. So just to maybe make this not sound like an advert, so essentially I maybe can talk about the experience of coming in from the UK and trying to set up a liberal arts school in India and what sort of challenges that posed. So the first thing that was on our mind was that another bit of context is that Alliance University, up until maybe 3 or 4 years ago, was probably exclusively a sort of more vocational kind of university. And it's around 2020 that many of the private universities in the South especially wanted to make the move to the humanities and make their universities less of a kind of employment churning factory and more of a kind of real place of learning. And that was the challenge essentially that faced us. So how do we go about doing that? What we decided to do was to have a combination of two essentially opposite educational philosophies. On the one hand, to have problem solving as the kind of overarching motto of the liberal arts, and on the other hand, knowledge for its own sake. Now, these two things don't really gel very well, but they were the two sort of pillars that people were clashing on when they were designing the university, reimagining it as a liberal arts institution. And we decided to sort of leave that paradox at the heart of the school's sort of philosophy, because I think that's a sort of very productive tension that should always be there in any school. And anyone who tells you the university is just for sort of ivory tower speculation, and then anyone who tells you that a university is just for sort of getting you a kind of rubber stamp for you to get employment is probably wrong on the issue, right? So um, that's probably the thing that maybe distinguishes the university's overarching teaching motto. But in terms of interdisciplinarity, I think we'll come to that eventually. But the way we decided to sort of organize the courses was that students who come into the university should be able to take courses ranging from the sort of hard scientific fields, from mathematics all the way to the arts, and no student should go out without having experienced a range of these things. Because what we believed also was that students at the age of 17 or 18 are hardly exhausted in mind to be able to settle down to their major at that age. So they should be able to essentially use the first couple of years at a university to experiment intellectually and then to be able to settle down. So that's something that ideas that we sort of probably borrowed quite a bit from other universities in the United States as well as in Europe. Yeah, so essentially to reimagine the university as a kind of hub for art and culture. We have our own literature festival, I think it was mentioned, and in large part which takes inspiration from the Mathrubhumi festival. So basically thinking of a university as a place that, yes, prepares you for the world, but also allows you to experiment and luxuriate in ideas.
Good evening, all. Very happy to be part of this wonderful event. I do come from Amrita University. This is my 17th year in our university. So a little bit about our university. Amma is our chancellor. And something which makes us different or stand out from other universities is the main motto is education for life and education for living. So that is something which we focus on. So we have multiple campuses, like 9 campuses across the country. We have courses ranging from engineering to physical sciences, Ayurveda, medicine, all sort of things. And then as we probably will be discussing today about NEP, so most of the courses that we have is in line with NEP, and we do focus on skill-based education, and yeah. So I think as we move along, we can share more of the experiences. Thank you.
Yes. That's great to know. Uh, Something that was really striking when I read about you and your work, both of you, was the amazing interdisciplinarity that you've brought to your work. So, we were just talking about millennials and Gen Z, and education has been changing at an exponential pace also. How do we negotiate interdisciplinarity, and how do we lead students towards better careers as well as maintain the quality of learning? It's a very big challenge for all educators. I would like to know your views on that.
So my view on interdisciplinarity is that essentially whether we like it or not, I think all the different disciplines and faculties are to some extent in a political struggle against each other. But by nature of political struggles, they learn somehow to coexist. And there are epochs in history where certain ways of probing reality will come out on top. So let's say in the Renaissance, you often have this cliche that the Renaissance is the Renaissance man, as it were, is somebody who could dabble in the arts and the sciences and so forth. And education, as such, became more specialized after that. And we often credit let's say the rise of science with having siloed education. But if one actually looks at the way in which weightage was placed on disciplines or ways of sort of understanding reality during the Renaissance, it's pretty clear that the visual image and to some extent rhetoric were the two sort of ways that were privileged, or rather, we know about the world of the Renaissance through the visual image and rhetoric more than we do the other disciplines. So similarly, at different times, let's say in Germany in the 19th century, one might have thought of music and philosophy as being the sort of regnant disciplines. And then of course, after the Industrial Revolution and all the toys that science gave us because of that, I would say that in the 20th century, it's pretty much had been decided that there's one way to understand the world around us, and that is by dividing the world into small units of matter and measuring it and figuring out how these particles move and behave. So these are all dominant paradigms that it's difficult to ignore when we talk about interdisciplinarity as a kind of idle sort of very genial idea where everybody just sits at the table and talks to each other. It's not really how it is in the world. But I think it's useful, nevertheless, to think of these things as being, these disciplines as being in a political struggle, and it being a sort of almost in theory an eternal struggle, as it were, where the different disciplines are vying for public authority to describe the world around us to us. So if we can think of interdisciplinarity in that way, then I think it would be very useful for students, because when they come to the university, there is a certain kind of appetite and excitement for taking courses in different fields, but there's also the sense in which the students are a little bit without a North Star, in this sense that, okay, what should I finally do? Should I decide to do something that I'm passionate about? Should I decide to do something that is more respected generally in the public sphere? Or should I do something that'll get me a job? And these are all different ways of finally deciding what you do, of course. But I think introducing very early on to the students the idea that there isn't really a hierarchy of disciplines. There might be a hierarchy now where science is at the top and the arts are at the bottom, let's say. But that hierarchy is just extremely sort of happenstance. It happens to be that we live in an epoch where that's true. And once that dimension of the disciplines is made clear to the students, I think they'll be better placed to make decisions about interdisciplinarity on their own, as it were.
Rightly said. And just to add to that, when students are given interdisciplinary courses, what happens is they get a little bit of everything, but it does not lead to proficiency in either of these subjects sometimes it does not lead to any product or any finesse in any work that they would be doing in those fields. But maybe Zeena can talk to us more about it because she has been doing amazing work in super molecular chemistry and bioactive natural products, and I was reading about all that. Uh, it may not be the same for all interdisciplinary work, but exceptionally in your case, I have seen that it has produced a lot of amazing results, and the outcome has been amazing. Would you please tell us about your experience with?
Yeah, so talking about the interdisciplinary aspects, first I would like to focus on the kind of courses that we have. So as Kalyani ma'am was mentioning that when you go for interdisciplinary approach, probably the student does miss out the main aspects. But I would say if we design a curriculum in such a way that they don't lose out the core aspects of a, let's say we have an engineering student, so they study what all, the core things that they need to learn. But at the same time, if there is a student who is more interested in, let's say, Vedanta, or let's say, there are certain courses based on Mahabharata and Ramayana, which will give him a more spiritual outlook. So we have such courses there. So it's not at the expense of, losing out the essential requirement. So we do have such courses where students are capable of, they are exposed to such different type of courses. Well, coming to research, we do foster interdisciplinary research because we have various schools, let's say School of Medicine and School of Ayurveda working closely with us. So since you mentioned about bioactive natural products, I would honestly mention that basically I'm a trained photochemist, but then when I joined our university, the experimental facilities were a bit less, and so that's how I started off with bioactive natural products. And it turned out to be a wonderful experience for me because you have this whole lot of medicinal plants around you where you can really work upon. You can just find out what is, what is the bioactive molecule which is in there. And then we have the School of Ayurveda close to us. So there is something called, you go for allopathy medicines, and then, we have a natural feel that you take something from Ayurveda, it should be fine, even if you take it along with allopathic medicines, it is going to be good. But then we don't know what is the impact of the interaction between these entities, whether these chemicals which are from the allopathy, does it really interact with the Ayurvedic medicine? So no one has done any research based on that. So, such kind of work we do. And yeah, coming back to the interdisciplinary courses that the students undergo, we do even, apart from giving importance to the interdisciplinary courses, we also impart, skill-based education, where they tend to work in the society. They try to work with the people around, and they try to find out the shortcomings and come out with suitable options. For example, we have something called live-in labs, which is so special about our university, where we have identified several villages. I would say there was a scheme couple of years back, which was referred to as 101 villages, where the students, along with the faculty, they go to the villages, they stay there, they study about the infrastructural facilities. Some places are there where they don't even have the basic amenities. So they work with the villagers. Sometimes they come up with a solution immediately. Later on, if it takes time, they come back to the university. They do enough research based on that. Then we go back. We make sure that such facilities are being made available to the villagers. So it's something that they learn the theory in the classroom, and then they try to apply it in the society, so that they are aware about what are all the problems which is in there. And so that is like an it's like an inclusive type of learning that they have. So
So wonderful what things you can do with chemistry and such disciplines that can be applied directly on life. In the case of our literature, what happens is interdisciplinarity is kind of letting literature die out because they prefer economics or psychology or whatever comes along with literature, the students. And there are very few students taking admissions in BA courses right now, and I'm wondering what is going to happen to the discipline. It's really scary.
Yeah, I mean, if it dies a natural death, such is the course of things. I think it's on the onus is probably on the literary critics to demonstrate the value of literary criticism, whether it be the value of close reading as it might apply to legal documents or whatnot. I mean, the original intention of literary criticism. I think if we think about the discipline of literature as being about reading texts and understanding them. The original intent of the course was not to be a thing isolated from society in itself, but rather to, if you look at the writings of I. Richards or William Empson, what you find is a belief that sort of probably goes back to Matthew Arnold that educating people in literature somehow creates citizens of a certain form of enlightened sort. And I think if that sense is just not there amongst the populace, I don't personally see the point in trying to push it through. Um, and the onus is probably also on the writers to keep literature fresh and make, if we look at the fate of the discipline of BA in English, I think it closely mirrors the fate of novel writing and poetry writing in general. So the onus is on both sides, I'd say.
Yeah. To talk about an entirely different aspect of education, you are from two top private universities in the country, and that is on the one side, the quality of education in the top universities is going up, and it's amazing. But on the other side, governments are still talking about foundational literacy and numeracy, and it's still a challenge. A lot of, and I suspect, and many people believe, that NEP is also widening this social divide among the students, some between the haves and have-nots. So what are your views on democratization of education? How far is education reaching everybody? Is it becoming a priority of the privileged? What do you think of that?
I do feel, I think there are measures being taken now to, more of democratizing it. I would feel so. I don't know, there might be opponents in that respect, but still, see, earlier when Sridhar was mentioning, there is this hierarchy of science over art subjects, right? What I have seen is, because we just go out for several outreach programs to several schools, and what I have seen is, there are plenty of opportunities out there, but then the awareness is very low. So I think even when you talk about NEP, it is about, getting over this socio-economic barrier, or, getting over this gender inequality and stuff like that. But then either way, I would say the whatever opportunities that we have, or, such things are not going into the population as such. So for a simple thing I can say, like when I was in my 10th, we had the pre-degree thing at that time. So all we were focusing on is to, opting for science or maths, and then go for an entrance, just go for engineering entrance or a NEET. But then even now the things are more or less the same. People are just focusing, even the students are just focusing on schools where, who offer JEE training or NEET training. And there might be like 5% of the students who are really keen into it, but then the rest of the lot, they just try their luck. And only the ones who don't clear these exams, they then think of other options. But what I feel is probably there are a lot of students who are into arts or who are into humanities, but there are no options to expose their capabilities, or they are not being given a chance to, realize it. And the same is the case with parents. Parents feel kind of an insecurity. And in our times, the one who opts for commerce or humanities, people would say that, okay, he wants to have a very easy life, or he wanted to bunk classes. That's what the scenario. But then if you look back at a data analyst now, probably he's the one who is having a very, good salary. So the various opportunities are out there, but the awareness is a thing that we need to, bring about right from the school age itself. The parents should be educated well, and I would say teachers have a pretty much a bigger role to play in this aspect. So, yeah, as you mentioned about NEP, I would say NEP is trying hard to break this barrier. So, provided the awareness is being taken care of well. So, I don't know whether I gave a specific answer. So,
I think there's two ways to look at democratization of education. There's the one which is we're talking about the ability of people to participate in education. That is the number of people who get education. That's democratization. And then the other way is to think of education as a thing which allows one to better participate in a democracy. And I think the latter is a sort of interesting aspect of things that's often forgotten, let's say. So in my work in Meghalaya to design the climate law there, one of the things that we're looking at is sort of the possibility of communities or villages managing their own renewable electricity. So each village has its own wind turbine and basically generates its own power and decides what the power is used for. They're a society not yet addicted to electricity like we are. So so, in talking about education there, where of course this can't be a constant sort of UN intervention thing where every time the wind turbine breaks down, some development agency comes in and fixes it. So it has to be to some extent a sort of self-managed system by the tribal communities of Meghalaya. So one of the essential questions that we had at that point was how do we handle the education of engineering in this context? Obviously, we can't sort of start teaching, the basic, mathematics and the basic courses and have a sort of 4-year degree for each villager who wants to be participating in this kind of sort of nascent democratic reform, let's say, energy democracy, whatever you want to call it. So we sort of, in a sense, we went back to the old 19th century texts when the first kind of experiments were being conducted in England and Scotland, where they were trying to sort of figure out what the sort of the relationship is between sort of like voltage and frequency and so forth. So, like, how did these things that we read as formulae on the paper come about as a sort of mathematical ratio or relation? And we found some really sort of curious experiments that we were able to replicate. And the idea is that we would take the villagers through these kinds of experiments so that it wouldn't be, in a sense, an understanding of electricity the way a physicist has, but a sort of provisional understanding of electricity enough to participate in a form of democratic reform. So that's one example, let's say, of education understood as something that allows you to participate in a democracy. And I think through this process, I've come to realize that there are essentially sort of, although I began by mentioning that, we have a liberal arts school at Alliance University, the notion of a liberal education as something that trains individuals into citizens able to participate in democracy is somewhat a kind of skewed to a kind of Western context, I believe. And I've begun to sort of tease out the concept of autonomy from liberty as such, and to maybe think about education as something that lends some measure of autonomy to individuals, individuals enough for them to participate in let's say determining the material conditions of their own lives, right? So ensuring that people have a rough understanding of how water comes out of the tap and how the light goes on and off in the room, and how sort of rice comes onto the plate, and these are sort of basic conditions that I think a sort of a democratization of education should have clearly in mind. And if we're thinking of democracy as a sort of a kratos power of a demos, then it's idle to talk of freedom of speech and the ability to type something on Twitter without really understanding whether or not without really understanding how we're able to use the internet, let's say, or how we're able to communicate. So even though I'm nominally representing the humanities here on the stage, I think that if one thinks of democratization in the terms of autonomy, then one has to think about a technical education for everybody, but just from the point of view of autonomy.
I was interested, I was amused to think about how we are talking about democratization of education today when hours ago the AAP has lost the Delhi elections and their major agenda was democratization of education. Well, this also leads me to think about in an education that is based on service and problem solving, the importance of the accountability of teachers. I have no idea how we are measuring it and how we ensure the accountability of teachers in the system. It's just an observation, you don't have to respond to it. And I was also thinking about how far our system, a higher education system, gives space to differential learning. Because everybody has a different style of learning, a different capacity, different priorities. We end up, whatever we say, ultimately homogenizing and putting everybody in the same basket, I feel. Uh, is there any conscious effort in the positive direction taken? Is there any change from before?
Yeah, I'll try to answer that. And yeah, as far as teachers are concerned, I would say in this digital world, I think teachers need to be updated every now and then because you just give away assignments to your kids. They just go to Chat GPT and then they download some document, they give it to you. And we tend to learn a lot from the kids as such because once while I was taking a beta course, we had this, especially this the soft submission of the assignments happened during the corona period as such, and that is when the students were using all these AI softwares. And there was one assignment that I got where I could see we used to check the plagiarism of the document, and I could see that the plagiarism was 0%. So out of curiosity, I asked my student. So he said, "Ma'am, there is some software where you can translate this into Chinese, and then you put it back to English, and then you don't have any plagiarism at all." So there are several things which we teachers need to be upfront. We have to be updated every now and then so that we can recognize what our students are doing. That is one thing. Well, coming to differential learning or varying ways of assessing the kids, apart from the earlier days where we had a routine kind of learning with a fixed, rigid syllabus. Now the things have changed a lot. We try to cater to the needs of each and every student. There will be slow learners, so we have different assessment patterns. We have several formative assessment patterns, so which will take into account the differently abled people. Um, so yeah, I think.
To add to this, and you can respond to it, why students plagiarize or they use ChatGPT or copy in the exam is to survive because they're not equipped to pass the exam. Nobody who is equipped to pass the exam would want to copy. They would want to show their merit. So there is this exam pressure, the depression that students go through, the tyranny of syllabus completion for the teachers as well as passing the exam for the students. Is it really necessary? Even though we talk against it and we claim that it's not there. I teach for a national exam where students are utterly stressed and disappointed, and it is that one exam they have to pass in order to be a professor. And many of the students just fall through. Even if they're good, they are not just good at taking the exam and memorizing. Rote learning is still, despite all the claims of NTA in making it very analytical, it is rote learning that helps students to pass this exam. How do you respond to that?
I don't know. I can always tell when something's been written by ChatGPT. Can you not? I think there's some bizarre choices in sort of lexical fields that are made and certain turns of thought that wouldn't be natural to a human being. I think it's I you know. Having another software to determine whether something was written by a software just leads us into a kind of infinite regress. probably. I think the best thing is to maybe have good teachers who are able to immediately discern that. Um, and on the question of accountability of the teachers, I'm going to contradict what I just said here. I think there might actually nowadays be too much accountability. That, like, the last course that I taught really put me off teaching for a while because I was spending about 70% of my time for that class just filling out forms as to, ticking boxes as to I taught this person that, and each accreditation has its own set of forms that one has to fill and so forth. And we talk about sort of the diversifying the learning experience for the students, but again, this is just a very petty personal point, but I think there's a diversity of teaching styles as well, and a diversity of minds who are teachers as well. And not all teachers are cut out to fill out so many forms, so there are some professors who will probably be more willing to teach and do a better job of teaching if they didn't have sort of every action in a classroom taken, being quantified, and then run through some processing machine. So that's my view on it. It's a very parochial view, but such as it is.
So if I can add on to what Sridhar has mentioned, I would say there are very less teachers who would love to teach these days. As Kalyani ma'am was mentioning, in the school scenario, probably a teacher who is teaching the 11th standard kids or maybe the 12th standard kids, they are under the pressure of finishing off the portions. So during the initial part of our session, Sridhar was mentioning about various literature that we have. We have numerous good books that are being written by wonderful people. But do our students have that thing of reading the books? They don't get a time, or they don't get exposed to reading good literature. So I would say a student who is in the 12th standard, starting from the academic session, he'll be just focusing on his textbooks, and the learning that comes into play is just the exam oriented learning. So we are more focusing on the numbers or the grades. uh, so I don't think a student gets exposed to some good literature or anything of that sort. And even the teachers are also under pressure, I would say. So because as you mentioned, we are all counting just for the grades, and only a student, if he fails NEET or JEE, does he think of another option. So I would say the student who passes through that phase, he develops a kind of I would say he gets demotivated. Probably he gets a feel that I have to try for arts or humanities just because I have failed NEET. So he has a sense of incapability, which is not good. We should try to identify the talent of all the students, just not focus on science and engineering, or let's say medicine and engineering. So
Yeah, despite all this, one of the wonderful things that post COVID we have seen is that there is a more focus on learning than teaching. The teacher has been, I think, kind of decentralized, and a lot of self learning has been happening. Though initially people did not like online learning and they preferred offline, they still do, but people have taken more to YouTube or online platforms to learn on their own. There is more choice, which is wonderful. I think as time goes on, it'll change more, and the teacher will be a co-learner, and whatever we envisage is going to happen because of the online learning practice, I suppose. We talk about disruptive pedagogical practices, all the new methods. We talk about blended learning and flipped learning. And is it really effective as of now? Do you think, as I said, it is more conducive to learning, or is it actually disrupting education itself?
it's accelerating the learning process, as such.
You do?
Yeah. So something to add on to the co-learning which is happening among the teachers, I would say there are a lot of, like post-COVID, there is a lot of self-learning happening. But then I would say it is better to have a watch on the contents that we have on YouTube, because there are a lot of YouTubers, and most of the contents, it's not as per the curriculum. So YouTube is one way of business also. But then it is better to have a watch of the teachers. So Because there are people who think that after a while, teachers as such, they won't exist, or you can just do all the self-learning. But I'm not for it, probably because I'm a teacher. Because always the experience that a teacher has to be imparted to the student. So even if you have NPTEL videos or Coursera courses that a student can study, those are all even developed by teachers. So teachers have a very good role in that. Well, coming to flipped classrooms or project-based learning, I would say it is imparting more of, it is motivating the students more. And in our university, I would say we have implemented more of project-based learning where they learn the theory in the class, then they are into mini projects. They do work with several eminent faculties. They even go out to industries, do internships, and they work with real life problems. And so that is helping them a lot to understand the topics better and become technically more sound. So.
When the line between the teacher and the student is getting blurred, is the teacher going to be an extinct species?
Might happen. I don't know. In a sense, I think that the teacher probably has still an indispensable role in that when you're confronted with either a text or a video, it presents itself always as a settled fact, whether you're reading a book or watching a lecture. What you're getting is something that essentially subordinates the consumer of that as somebody who's kind of passively receiving, whether it be a text or whatever it is. And I think the teacher is essential to put the student in a more dialectical sort of front with the text the text with which the student is confronted, right? So
I would strongly disagree to that. I would say a book or a video need not always make you a consumer. You can develop your critical thinking. You can have
yeah,
a
yeah.
dialectical
That's what
relationship
I'm
with the
saying the
text.
teacher has to do, because that's a bit of advice that the book itself is not going to give you. The book will present itself to you as a settled bit of learning. It's the
No.
teacher who tells the
The,
student,
the
you have
teacher,
to be dialectical.
you
With
can be in a dialogue with the text. That's what teachers do. We don't have teachers to teach us, but the students are becoming like teachers. I'm not saying that teachers are going out of fashion, but I think the students are getting empowered in many ways because of the social media and the exposure that they get and everything. I think they're developing their critical thinking more, and many times they don't even need anybody to guide them. What do you think of that?
I don't know that they are developing critical thinking, because what I see more and more is a certain kind of anarchy of information where you're getting your sort of political into your political silos in your Facebook or social media, and whatever is given to them by a podcaster or whatever it is generally received as stated fact or wisdom, and there's there's a sort of, I guess, might be antiquated according to you, my views on this, but there's a sort of sense in which when you're young, I think you tend to take these things that come from a podium, whether it be that of a published book or a YouTube channel, as being somewhat settled information or settled views, and the sort of what was began with the notion of fake news a few years ago, but now has just sort of, if fake news is fake news, then fake news is fake news, and so forth. It's sort of eaten away at itself. But I think without the sort of skills that can only be imparted by talking to someone, whether that be a teacher or some mentor of some sort, one doesn't really know how to be critical and dialectically engage with a text. A text itself will not tell you to be dialectical or critical. Somebody will have to tell you to be critical of what you're reading.
Yeah, we're coming to what we were discussing before the session started. What we need is the literacy, the awareness to use the media or the text in the right ways, right? We need to focus more on this digital literacy and the ways in which you should be reading critically and creatively, right?
Because nowadays there is plenty of information which is available, and you just given a term to you just give an assignment. The student immediately goes to Wikipedia. They just do a search. They write down something, and whatever is given in Wikipedia might not be the right one. So you have plenty of information. Information overloading is there, so they don't know where to choose from. So that is where I think there is the part of a teacher is very important there, where they should be directed in a proper way. After which, as you mentioned, they develop a sort of a critical thinking and stuff like that. But before that, they should be directed in a proper manner. And yeah, the awareness of where to look at and what books to refer to or which websites to refer to for certain information, that is also necessary. Rather than just just doing a blind search, I would say.
Which is why, instead of saying don't use Wikipedia or ChatGPT, I was at a conference in Nanded 2 days ago, and they were talking about how to use Wikipedia and AI, ChatGPT in the classroom. I remember a few years ago we were talking about how to use the mobile phone in the classroom. It just totally changed now. So we are like, yeah.
Yeah, since we were talking about ChatGPT, we do deal with scientific publications, and many of the journals, they do impart a rule that the plagiarism percentage should be less than 20. So what we do is we write down a document, then we put it into Turnitin, we get the plagiarism report. So nowadays, since with the upsurge of various research publications and such, there are certain authors who just write an entire document using ChatGPT. So I was just thinking, the other day I was talking to my student, I was mentioning that probably now we do, I do tell my students not to, rely on ChatGPT, or don't bring me documents that you have prepared using ChatGPT. But then probably 10 years from now, you might reach a stage where you have to use ChatGPT in a certain way. If you don't use ChatGPT, then probably that could be a problem. Then 10 years from now. So you have to use it wisely, because you just give in some inputs and it gives us answers based on that. So the input is coming from our mind, right? So you can use it more wisely.
Yeah, it's time to go to Q&A, but I'll just respond to this. One professor just casually told me, I have 40 publications in the last 2 years. I said, okay. Everything is written by ChatGPT. It's not just the students, come on. It's not just the students.
So now we'll take in a couple of questions.
You mentioned about differential learning or personalized, customized pedagogy. And also told about you are scared of. My question is, are you scared of the onslaught of the online? Because you feel that teachers are an endangered species, or an extinct species. Were you scared of online onslaught?
No, I'm not at all scared. I'm all for it, actually. Differential learning is possible when we don't have one single exam to test the skills of or the knowledge of the student. It should be progressive throughout the curriculum, throughout the course. You should be, you know, assessing the students. And online learning and online platforms are positive. When I said teacher is an extinct species, I only meant that the compartmentalization between teacher and student is now there, not there anymore. In a very happy manner, students are becoming like teachers, and teachers have become more like students. The blurring of the distinction between the teacher and the student is a very wonderful thing, I think. I welcome it. And that has been possible because of the influx of online learning and teaching. That's what I think.
I've been a professor for 29 years. I came here to hear about something redefining higher education. I don't know what I'm going to go back with. I really don't know. So just wanted to know one thing. A few weeks before, there was an article in Hindu with regard to why all pass should be stopped at 5th grade and 8th grade, and why this is contributing to degradation of higher education. Your take on that, all pass system in schools. And second question again is, society, every time I hear that society is there, we need to cater to the society, higher education needs to cater to the society. If that is the question to be taken up, which I solely believe it has to be taken up also, why is it that when we define stakeholders in higher education, we are concerned only about the teachers at prime, then the students, and probably the administrative staff. Now, this is not the hierarchy that we need to look into. We need to look into the society first. There are different stakeholders at the societal level. Now, none of the universities, I've looked into the, what do you call, the director boards or board of studies or whatever it is in various universities. None of them have any stakeholders brought into this, even in the academic council, which hardly meets an ear. So your take on all these things as experts in higher education sitting there. Thank you.
I think the problem, sir, is not all pass, but the fact that the quality of education is not maintained from standard one. If education is high standard and if we touch upon all aspects of, we give a holistic education, all pass is good. When now all pass comes, what happens is when they reach people like me, I am dealing with students who cannot write one sentence correctly, who do not know the concepts correctly, because they say we have to just put numbers, 1, 2, 3. For putting the numbers of the answers, we get marks. Like that they pass. They come without even very basic knowledge. A lot of people, we have to focus on the quality, obviously. There should be standards of assessing the performance of the teachers and the students. There should be totally new parameters maybe. Not just one exam where passing students or not passing students is not really an issue. There are loopholes for everything. When we talk about internal assessment, teachers will find ways of circumventing it and students will also find ways of circumventing it. Nothing is really happening in many of the colleges and universities. There are many which are working very well, but majority of colleges and universities are not doing their job well. Majority of students who get BA and MA degrees are not even meeting the basic requirements, basic standards. That's the truth.
While thinking of redefining higher education, how will you explain the tendency of exodus of students from Kerala to abroad universities? One thing, in your presentation you told about even the faculties are in political struggle. Will you explain these two questions to you?
I think the exodus can be explained in pretty direct ways, right? I mean, uh, your your sort of society is architected in such a way that employment is granted based on certain brand names that you can claim in your CV, I think. And there's a certain still post-colonial mindset that somebody who, in India that is, that somebody who studied in a, this university or that outside of India is more likely there's some sort of prestige that's attached to that. I don't think it's anything more than that. If there is a certain belief that the quality of education is somehow better in the West, let's say, Occidental education, then I think that's a belief that one has to confront one has to confront. That it may not necessarily be that education is perfect in India, but certainly there are flaws everywhere, I think. And that's just maybe an atavism that has to be confronted. The second question was about my views on the disciplines as being in a political struggle, right? So what I meant by political struggle is that if one thinks of the different disciplines, let's say the sciences, the arts, philosophy, history, whatever it is, they're all competing in a sense to sort of for the authority to describe the world in their own methodologies, right? A historian will try and say that the world is as it has been described by historians in the past. The world of the past is as it is disclosed to you through the pages of history. The painter will tell you that that a painter is giving you the most accurate picture of reality because it's giving you a sort of visual picture of it. The poet will tell you something similar. The scientist will tell you that I'm able to make certain predictions. I'm dealing with the things that are objective. Locke's hierarchy of the senses, that that extension and motion are the only things that are real in nature, and that all the other things such as color, smell, touch are all sort of ephemera of the imagination. So they're all kind of trying to undermine each other in certain ways in order to be on top. These are all rhetorical strategies, right? So if you look at in the 17th century, for instance, when natural science was first separating itself off from philosophy, uh, the the first thing that everyone does, from Hobbes to the people of the Royal Society of London and Locke and so forth, the first thing that they do is tell you that metaphorical language is confused because words are referring to things that they're not. And therefore, don't trust the poets, trust the scientists. And it's a sort of rhetorical game that, and then in the next century, Blake and the Romantics say that the scientists will try and explain life to you by dissecting an animal, right? Try and explain life by death, in a sense. So it's a constant dialectical struggle, and in that sense, all the disciplines are always going to be at some form of political war with one another. So there's no point trying to think about interdisciplinarity as a kind of sort of comity of nations. Interdisciplinarity is a bit like the UN, a kind of, of sort of falsehood put on top of the reality of the sort of international politics equivalent in the disciplines. Yeah.
Okay, with this we have come to the end of the Q&A session.